Just the button on the bottom.
We're probably going to start a little bit, maybe in about 5 minutes. We're waiting on 2 more board members because we do not have a quorum just yet. So go ahead and start talk amongst yourselves.
We can't. We couldn't. I'm just going to go. I'm just going to. Yep. Are you ready?
All right, good evening, everyone.
On plane.
This special meeting of the Governing Board is now called to order. I'll let the record show that we do have a quorum. Mr. Aldama will be arriving shortly, so we're going to go ahead and begin. But let's start with a moment of silence. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Sagata-Jones, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, not at this time.
Okay, I'll need a motion to adopt the agenda.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, we do have one call to the public. Ms. Tijuana Harper.
Good evening. Does my 3 minutes start now?
Yes.
Okay. A 10-year-old boy was left on the side of the road and not allowed to get on the school bus Thursday on the 20th of September in Glendale because he was unable to fit his basketball in his backpack. When the bus driver was asked why she left him endangering his safety, she replied that was his choice. Glendale Elementary School District policy is that no child is to be left in the morning and on a route and to ensure their safety. My questions would be, how is a grievance such as this to be addressed, and what are your thoughts generally on this issue? Are you aware of the steps that will be taken to address this in regards to the bus driver, who is also the school bus trainer for Glendale Elementary School District? And if fact the website states and all the policies state that the safety of the students who attend in Glendale Elementary School District are their priority, my question would be, to what degree?
All right, thank you. I understand that administration will continue to work with you, and so thank you for bringing that to our attention. All right, we'll move to our consent agenda. Are there any items that board members would like pulled? No. Hearing none, I'll need a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right, we are at our reports and information items, the AZ Merit and A through F letter grades.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board. We had placed this agenda item on because we thought at that time we would have the letter grades, and at this time we still do not. The state has let us know that they will use the same calculations that they did last year, but they're making some adjustments, and they're still doing so as we received another email this morning. So once we have that information, we'll bring it back to share.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so now that brings us to our action items. We'll start with A, policy revision, second reading.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended the governing board approve the second reading and adoption of the revisions to the following policies: BCB, board member conflict of interest; BE, school board meetings; BEDF, voting method; DICA, budget format; DIE, audits, financial monitoring; DKA, payroll procedures, schedules; DN, school properties disposition; FCB, retirement of facilities; FEA, educational specifications for construction; GBEAA, staff conflict of interest; GBEF, staff use of digital communications, electronic devices; GCCH, professional staff bereavement leave; GCO, evaluation professional staff members; IJNDB, use of technology, resource and instruction; IKAB, report cards, progress reports; IL, evaluation of instructional programs; IMD, school ceremonies and observances; JEB, entrance age requirements; JFAA, admissions of resident students; JFABB, admissions of exchange and foreign students; JFABD, admissions of homeless students; JFABDA, admissions of students in foster care; JICK, student bullying, harassment, intimidation; JJIB, interscholastic sports; JKD, student suspension; JL, student wellness; JLCD, medicines, administering medicines to students.
All right, any discussions, questions?
I have one with regards to JL. Ms. Smith had sent me a message before getting on the plane asking that, because this is for K through 5 for the recess, having that second opportunity. And I wanted to, I think she had voiced this concern before of how to, as a district, to make sure it's not used as a punishment for an entire class because of, 1 or 2 kids misbehaving or anything like that if it's withheld. But I have seen some videos of different schools using that second physical activity, and they just refer to it as like brain movement, where they're just getting up and they're just getting that energy and getting, kind of the bugs worked out a little bit and getting the blood circulating. So I think maybe if we could get a report on, some of the ways that we will be looking at this throughout the district. and making sure that it's not a penalty for an entire class because of, you know, 1 or 2 kids type of situation.
We can do that. We've asked, as I stated before, it's noted in their lesson plans what they're doing. We can ask for them, I can ask administrators and remind them at the next regional meeting about the policy. They did receive all policies, and so we can go over that again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay. We need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the second reading of all of the policies that were listed.
Second. Okay. I'll kind of go. I'll go ahead with Ms. Bartels. How do you vote?
Aye.
Okay. Ms. Pimentel?
Aye.
Okay. Chair votes aye. Motion passes. All right. We are, Mr. Aldama, at item 6B of the action items. Now we're at interim principal. Okay.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended the governing board appoint Ms. Lori Alonso as the interim principal of Glen F. Burton School, salary and benefits commensurate with other principals.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Well, I do have one comment. It's, you know, it's kind of a sad reason that we're having to make this decision.
Absolutely.
So, but if nobody else has any objection, I would like to recommend that Ms. Alonso be the interim principal for Glen F. Burton.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Aldama, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Bartels?
Aye.
Ms. Pimentel?
Aye.
Okay. Chair votes aye. Motion passes. And congratulations, Ms. Alonso. Okay.
Yeah, I believe they're in one of the playoffs, or they're in at the flag football playoffs.
Okay. All right. Item 6C is the National School Board Association Annual Conference.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended the governing board approve governing board members and administrators to be named to attend the National School Boards Association Annual Conference in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania from March 28th through April 1st, 2019.
I believe Liz needs probably some names now, right? Are you going to be calling in for or
Registration.
Registration opens mid-October, so
Yeah,
just before then, if possible, that gives us the best hotels.
okay? Unless you know now.
Well, I know Ms. Smith and I pending the election outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay.
I would like to attend.
Yeah. Yes. I as well. Mr. Aldama, you want to let her know when you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So with that, I guess we do need a motion to approve item 6C.
I move to approval for the governing board and administration of names to be followed to attend National School Board Association Conference.
Okay, Mr. Aldama, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Bartels?
Aye.
Ms. Pimentel?
Aye.
Okay, chair votes aye, so the motion passes. All right, we are now at 6D, our annual financial report.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, it is recommended the governing board approve the annual financial report for fiscal year 2017-2018 as presented. And at this time, Mr. Barragan will have his presentation for us.
President, members of the board, Superintendent Sagata Jones. The annual financial report is a requirement by statute, needs to be approved by the governing board no later than October 15th. And so I will walk you through kind of an executive summary of some of those expenditures. The M&O budget, which is the greatest or the biggest fund that we have, we spent almost $66 million in M&O, which is a significant decrease from the prior year. You're looking at about a 5% decrease in expenditures. The budget balance carry forward, which I know that Mr. Aldama had consistently asked for, I want to call your attention to the bottom of that slide. That is an increase from where we were when we adopted the budget. And that increase is because of positions, expenditures obviously not materializing. But I want to talk a little bit later, so hold the budget balance carry forward discussion in the back of your mind, because we're going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. Oh, there it is. I want you to look at the enrollment of what it's been since 2013 and where it is as of 2018, which is the last year that ended. It's a significant decrease. And if you're looking at the enrollment that are in the board updates, you're seeing that trend continue this year again. We provide you with a comparison of revenues and expenditures. So this is very specific to special ed in M&O. The revenue generated is about $5.4 million, but the district incurs an expense of about $10.8 million. Now, this is not isolated to Glendale. This is an issue statewide, and it's been an issue for 10, 15 years. Several years ago, probably about 2007 was the last year that the state legislature did a special education study. In other words, they took all the public school district information on what they spent on special education and did a comparison of revenue to expense. And the whole idea behind that cost study was to give the state and policymakers an understanding of how they were funding those levels. That hasn't happened. This is pretty consistent, I would say, statewide, where your revenue is never sufficient for your expense. And that issue, where the revenue is less than the expenses incurred, is pretty consistent in transportation. And I would say that that's probably a pretty statewide problem as well. The orange or the yellow-like color represents the expense, and the orange or darker orange represents the revenue. And so that revenue is 1.2, the expense is 2.5, and that amount on the revenue side has not changed for many years. The maintenance and operation, or the M&O override, as you well know, helps fund full-day K, our teacher salaries, PE, music, are some classroom supplies, educational assistance. And so, as you well know, and based on some study sessions that we've had in the past, our voters have supported us for the last 15 years to fund full-day K. The state does not provide full-day funding, and it hasn't been for many years now. And so without that continued funding, those programs and/or services would not be available to our students now. Classroom Site Fund, what you might call Prop 301, was approved back in the 2000, and this last legislative session, that was extended another 20 years. So in all my presentations to the board, I've talked about how this is a financial cliff. Well, because of this last legislative session, it's been extended for 20 years. At least it's not a cliff for the next 20 years. But to give you an idea, by fund, we're spending $787,000, Fund 11. Fund 12, you're looking at about 1.4 million. Fund 13, you're looking at about 1.7. But altogether, you're looking at $4 million that is spent out of 301 this last year that ended.
Can I ask a question real quick on that spot?
Please.
Because there was some conversation during this last legislative session that because it wasn't, the renewal wasn't done by voters, is there a possibility that we need to keep an eye on our legislators that they do not decide to undo it?
The Classroom Site Fund, whatever bill it was this last legislative session, I do believe it had 2/3 of the votes that are needed. You know, I would always say that we have to always be looking at any funding cuts and frankly holding policymakers accountable to those potential cuts. But the whole idea is really to allow school districts to continue having these monies available to spend them in the areas that are outlined in 301. People can give and take, right? So it's just something that we have to be, frankly, proactive in making sure that policymakers and the public understand how these monies are being used. Because this would have been a financial cliff. If you look at Fund 11 and Fund 13, you're looking at about $3.4 million or so that we wouldn't have that currently fund salaries.
Right.
Capital, just wanted to give you a pie chart of what the expenses in capital. You can see that this last year, we invested about 1.8 in technology. That's something that we've consciously have been moving towards. And you can see the breakdown. We did spend less this year than in prior years, but it allows us to have a more one-to-one student to device ratio moving in that direction. And there's a little bit more work to be done, but this last year we spent 1.8 towards technology-related needs. This is just a visual that we want to provide on the revenues versus the expense on capital-related items. You can go back to 2013, and then you can see what that revenue to expense has been. Madam President, members of the board, I believe it was a couple of meetings ago, Board Member Aldama asked about performance contracting. I can't remember what caused that conversation or that question to surface, but we wanted to address that. performance contract was something that this board back in 2013 approved of. Greg and I inherited that, and frankly, it was a good decision by the board, because performance contracting is really a financing vehicle for school districts that don't have capital funds. The idea behind performance contracting is really to reduce your expenses in utilities. So for example, the way that I explained it the other night was, if you're spending, just for simplicity reasons, $1,000 to APS or SRP as your monthly AC bill, but you buy a more efficient unit, and now you're spending or sending APS or an SRP, say $700, that $300 difference, you're paying for that new HVAC or AC unit that you purchased. So you're not spending less, you're just reallocating a portion to buy equipment that we otherwise could not have afforded. Madam President, members of the board, does that help answer the question about what performance contracting is? I'm happy to give you other examples, but we've made a lot of changes to be more efficient, whether central plant upgrades, HVAC units, lighting, upgraded water heaters, controls. So when we talked about, it was the Energy Star, I think, celebration that triggered it. And when we looked at the data, we were sending, and this is collectively, all together, regardless of what type of utility it is, we were spending almost $2.7 million towards utility-related cost. As a result of performance contracting, this last year that we just ended, we spent 2.2. So the difference, that money that's no longer being sent to the utility company, is a payment towards the exterior lighting, HVAC units. And really from 2014 through this last year that ended, you're talking about $1.8 million that has been reallocated, instead of going to the utility company, going towards those needs, specifically HVAC, heaters, and everything else that's been done over the last 4 or 5 years. Mr. Aldama, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Excuse me. So I think the important one was what triggered it, but you just answered it. Was just it was the Energy Star. So I think it's important for those, especially for Ms. Pimentel, who was not on the board at the time when we did that, to understand why we did it.
And if I could add, the important piece too is that while we've had financial challenges as it relates to capital, this district has not been idle and said, we can't do X, Y, and Z. We're finding creative ways to provide our students, our staff, with the resources that they need for a quality education. And so I think this is a very good example of that, frankly.
Yeah, so further question. So is this the total savings? Is this the package? And then how long was the contract for? Was it just 5 years?
No, it's not 5 years.
Okay.
I'll have to look at the terms, but to give you an idea, and I'm glad you asked that question, you're looking over $12 million of items that we purchased because we didn't have the capital monies readily available to make those purchases. So it's probably more like a 10-year deal that we have in place. And so again, with every year that we reduce our utility cost, that savings goes towards that payment for those items that we just mentioned.
So if I may continue, so the superintendent can just bring this back to us in a memo. If it needs to be on the agenda, that's fine. I like to know this back in 13, what the length of time that contract was. Yeah. I don't remember if it was 10 or not, but I'd like to know that. And then it's not really agendized, so maybe at a later date if it's not appropriate now, but so the district also has to continue, if we're not doing now, but I'm sure facilities director's doing it, is how do we start to look at our energy savings by the equipment that we use in classrooms and buildings. So there's cost savings there too. I tell you, one of the first places you can cut your budget is right there. Without access utilities anymore, well, we're paying it all ourselves. So we need to be mindful of where we're using that energy. So I think we need to look into that as well.
Madam President, members of the board, we're happy to provide you additional information on performance contract. We didn't know how much information you wanted, but we're happy to provide you that information.
And then the last thing is one of the reasons why I also brought it up was that was the trigger, and the second one is I remember only one, and I could be wrong, only one update since 13 from this program, and so this program is important enough that the board needs to have an update on a regular basis on where we at with that, so, and especially if it's a 10-year.
Madam President, members of the board, just to refresh everyone's memory, the performance contracting was done in 3 phases. I believe it was in 14 was the first year that we implemented, 15, and then in 16. And those updates would have been during the board memo updates on what was happening maybe during the summer, during the fall break. But we're happy to provide you a summary of what we've done. In December of 2015, the district sold the final $9.2 million of the $28 million that we had available through bond authorization. You can just see the breakdown of where those monies have been spent this last year. I believe we spent about $2.8 million related to bonds, restroom renovations, campus security systems, and school bus replacements, and then you can see down the list. What we also felt, I think it was a request that was made last year, just to provide you what our bonds and short-term debts were. As of July 1st of 2017, we had almost $26 million in outstanding bonds. We did not issue any this last year. We retired about 1.3, which is paid back 1.3 million. And so we have about $24.5 million left in outstanding bonds, and with every year, we reduce that, assuming that we're not issuing any more. This last year that just ended, Greg and his team were able to receive about $349,000 towards needs at Landmark, Challenger, and Discovery, and you can see what that was by those 3 campuses. Classroom dollars report, this is sometimes a very hot topic. This conversation came up at the ASBA. I know Mrs. Wilson attended a very well breakout session where some of this, as a result of Prop 206, challenges with hiring had surfaced. When a district loses enrollment to the extent that we have, and so over 2 years we've lost 1,000 kids, that trend's going to continue, so we'll know more after our 40th day and then after our 100th day what that loss is this year. And then you add requirements to Prop 206, which is increasing the minimum wage every, I believe it's July 1st of every year, to the cost of inflation. It's really going to skew your data and your classroom reports. And so I think it's important that we understand that, and we gave you a comparison of what we project it might be, so that it's not a surprise in March. Give or take, we're going to be pretty close to these numbers.
Madam President. So we have always, I guess at least I have, always scrutinized administrative costs. And I remember I felt they were high when they were at 10%. And I remember yourself saying that we were actually low in comparison to other districts. But now we're at 12.1 and probably climbing. We're a declining district. So can you explain why our administrative costs are much higher now than they were previously?
Great question. Last year we were low. This last year that ended, so I want to be clear, in 2017 they were low compared to other surrounding districts. This year that just ended, you're going to see that continue, because proportionately when you decrease enrollment, we're not making staffing changes. And so an expense is still being incurred while your number of students is decreasing, so your per pupil expense goes up. And then you add those additional financial requirements of the Prop 206 of increasing expenses, more likely in transportation, maintenance, food service, maybe some EA positions depending on where their hourly rate are. So you're going to see costs go up in 3 or 4 of those categories, and then proportionally we're not making any staffing adjustments regardless of whether those positions are when we're decreasing enrollment. And so I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. Otherwise, if we continue to maintain the current staffing ratios with every year, we're going to continue to look more efficient in those areas.
Mr. Aldama, if I may. Also, when we looked at this as well, the increase, and Mr. Bergen has explained why that occurs. Within the last 3 years, and we've seen the decrease over the last 2 years in the loss of the 1,000 students, we have not made those programmatic changes. We have obviously collapsed classrooms, and we were able to do that because we didn't have enough teachers in classrooms anyway, so we were able to do that, the collapsing of classrooms. But when we talk about the programmatic adjustments that need to be done, for example, we're almost approaching, I think next week, the 40th day, and we have schools that are sitting at our lowest is 464 kids, with our highest at 874 kids, but we have not made those adjustments. They're all staffed the same, with the exception last year we made an adjustment of those schools under the 700 mark with attendance clerks, but everybody is staffed the same. You have 2 administrators, you have admin assistants, you have just the whole programmatic piece of it has not been looked at. So if we, later on in the agenda, when we get to future meetings and events, I really would recommend and encourage us to do a study session on what that looks like. The other compounding piece with that, as Mr. Bergen has said, is with Proposition 206. That, we have to, we're hit with that, and no one's going to argue that we want our classified to have more money, but at the same time, we don't have enough money to help do that. What we're doing, most of those positions, many of those positions on the ed services side come out of entitlement, and that's really taken a hit on entitlement. So there just aren't enough of those funds coming in. We received notification, I think it was yesterday or this morning, about the B weight for special education and ELL and the decrease in that. So it's just less and less money coming in, yet we have not made some of the programmatic adjustments we need to do.
Madam President, Ms. Agata-Jones, thank you for that. That's really clarifying. I wouldn't hold you accountable to that. You are inheriting everything at the district that's at your helm. So thank you for that. And precisely that. We need to start looking at how we're operating. If we're a declining district, unfortunately everything else declines. What shouldn't decline is the education that our kids get. But that also can be something we have to look at. It's not something we want. But at the administrative level, we definitely have to look at how we're operating. If we're see a huge significant decrease in the school, we need to look at how we're operating administratively. Really tough pill to swallow when we've given a 10% salary increase across the board, including administrators, and then we see that we're at 12.1%. So I would definitely entertain a conversation about how we're going to operate differently if we're going to keep on declining. And is the administrative levels going to be the same, or are they going to change?
Madam President, members of the board, if I could also call your attention, just let me back up to the where is it? Just when you need it, you can't find it. The M&O override. We're just talking about addressing the decrease in enrollment. And we'll know what that decrease is going to be this year, because remember, current year funding, we're going to have to reduce now, so that carry forward that I mentioned earlier is going to help absorb that reduction in revenue in this new year. The law will require us, and I want to be very careful on what I'm saying so that it's not viewed as trying to influence the outcome of an election, but if revenues do not continue if the override does not continue at 15% of the RCL consistently over the next several years, we're going to have to reduce our budget next year by about $3.3 million, and if I remember correctly, in the subsequent year, by the remaining 2/3. Decreased enrollment, a reduction in the M&O override together, that's what we're facing. And so I would agree that business will have to change. We cannot conduct business as we're used to if we're going to be a sustainable, thriving, highly performing district.
What are some other things that are included in that administration category?
The administrator category consists of the superintendent, the assistant superintendents, the entire HR department, the entire accounting, payroll, IT, purchasing, warehouse, the school principal, the AP, and their secretaries or assistants. Those categories are what make up the administrative cost, which is the projected 12% figure. what I want to communicate, regardless of if nothing changes other than enrollment, we're not, let's say that there's just a hiring freeze. There's no pay increases, just everything is the same. As your enrollment decreases, that administrative cost is automatically going to go up. Your transportation cost is automatically going to go up. So by doing nothing, while having a decrease in enrollment will push those percentages up higher. And you're going to see here, if you look at number 2, it's just going to make us look inefficient. And not just Glendale, but those districts that are declining, that's going to be a challenge for all those. So unless you're probably a growing district, that probably won't affect you too much. But any district that could potentially staying flat and decreasing, those are where we're going to see those big jumps in what would appear to be inefficiencies. And just as a reminder, last year was the final year that we had financial safeguards. In other words, moving forward, current year funding is real. So if you're not prepared for it, if your enrollment's lower than what we expected, there's no legislative relief to give us a pass. Prop 206, because of those raises that were given, we don't believe we'll have anyone that will be given an increase as a result of being below the minimum wage. I would assume that next year we will have to have that conversation because I believe it goes from 11 to 12 at that point. Increased competition results in decreased enrollment, and that's just less revenue. And I think to the point in the conversation that's already been had, we just need to be more efficient and closely monitor our expenses, and we have to just have a competitive advantage for sustainability. The M&O and the bonds, while they address and help us, they don't fully fund all of our needs. And just as a reminder, mostly to the public and anyone watching, that the district is part of the capital lawsuit, and we're one of several plaintiffs. The only thing that I can maybe briefly talk about is that we're in the thick of it right now, and we're providing a lot of documentation, and we're just actively pursuing that lawsuit. If the board has any questions, I'm happy to continue to address the board.
Madam President? Question, so I wrote down some of the, not individual, but positions that are part of the administrative costs. So 2 questions, and I'll just send them to you, then you can answer them. So who sets which positions are categorized as administrative costs, and then how do we recategorize it so some of these positions like secretaries are not counted as administrative costs, and then we see real true costs? Does that make sense?
Madam President, members of the board, that's an excellent question, and it's something that we've actually been trying to change for a long time. The short answer is that is dictated by the Auditor General's office, and they have in the USFR, and part of their calculation that they provide, I'm happy to send that to you in the next board memo, is how they've defined other categories as well. But it's a policy decision outside of our control that we don't have any input other than just trying to lobby for them to change that because we believe it doesn't represent true administrative cost.
Right.
If the issue is of that administrative cost, how many of those or how much of that is truly administrators, directors, assistant superintendents? In previous data that I've calculated, you're looking at 2%, roughly 2 to 3% of that percentage.
Mr. Bergen, is it correct, or I can't remember?
Well, if I may, let me just finish my question. I don't want to interject with you either, but I just want to finish it with saying then what I would like to ask for the superintendent, that because I want to be supportive of our, I mean, it sounds like it may sound like, or the optics are out, well, this board member just wants to oust administrators. No, we all need to be transparent in where our money and our dollars are going these times, all times. But what I'd like to see is for you, through the superintendent, to extrapolate just the administrators from that category so we can see that. And then maybe the optics changes. Now we can speak to it. So we can do that internally. That's not something we're changing the law on. Is that correct?
Madam President, members of the board, that's correct, and we're happy to do that. I think there's been attempts, at least at times, to try to bring more knowledge and information, and not to single out any board member, but I think the general public, because there are I've said this consistently. This report is used as political propaganda. Districts across the state, it's not that they're spending 12% on administrators as maybe you and I think about administration, right? Because it does include IT, the warehouse, payroll, purchasing, the entire HR department, and I'm sure I missed maybe a couple of other positions, but you're talking about 2 to 3% here. I would imagine that's probably within, you know, 1% or 2% across the state as well. And so it's really just bringing information, not just singling out any board member, but really just bringing more information to the public. Those are conversations we've had in just the business official groups, because the average person doesn't understand that, and I think we do need to talk more about that.
Clear and concise. Mr. Gowdy-Jones, apologize. Go ahead.
No, my apologies. I was just going to say we need to be comprehensive within the list, because there's other people that I believe may fall on that list as well. And I think it's, as you said, we need to be transparent about that and then really look at what those are. And so, it goes back to those programmatic changes.
Madam President, members of the board, I'm happy at the next board memo to take what's considered administrative cost and then break it down by category. So if it's your principals and APs and their secretaries, I can break it down and then say, hey, of this 12.1%, whatever it is for administration, as at least we might think about it or define it, HR, technology, warehouse, purchasing, payroll, we can break that down for you. That shouldn't be difficult at all.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Is that something the rest of the board would like to see?
I would, because the reality is when people hear administrative costs, they think just the district office, your superintendent, your assistant superintendents. They don't realize how many other layers there are. They don't include, you know, we have 17 schools. Sure. You've got a principal, you've got an AP, you know, it adds up, and people don't realize just how much, you know, they focus on the district level and think you're spending 12% there, and it's like, no, this is all of these areas.
Madam President, members of the board, what I would also encourage the board to think about, the conversation about how do you define administration, I would also encourage the board to understand what's under student support. Mm-hmm. You have people, individuals, that are contributing to the education of that child in the classroom, an OT, PT, a CELS, an AA, that for the sake of classroom dollars, they're not considered a classroom dollar expense, if you will, but those are critical roles that help that child learn in their classroom. So while we're focusing on administration, I would also encourage that we, and not just the board, but society in Arizona, understand what student support is. Right. Because you have key positions there that, in our opinion, should be under classroom dollars that are not. When a school the more school districts receive federal dollars, grants, or whatever the case may be, the more they receive, the more that's going to tip the scale against the district in classroom dollars. Because most of that, for the most part, is going to be a student support type of expense, which is not considered a classroom dollar.
Yeah.
Madam President, another question, and if it's off topic, Liz will just yank my ear. Time to get back on topic.
I'll slide out of the way in case you throw something.
Yeah, she'll throw something over here. I've always criticized our budget process. Really, you and your team build it and you bring it to us, and we skip a lot in between. And I've had board members agree with that sentiment. I'm not saying today, but during those conversations. So I'm not saying that you run a poor one. I just think it's a poor way of bringing a budget. Not you, I just don't think this board has looked at it enough to change it. With that said, if you want advocates within the organization, then bring this board and bring the employees clear and concise information so that they know what they're looking at. With that said, and now you may be doing this, and I don't believe we are, but we need to have budget breakouts with staff during your budget process, because staff can be your biggest advocate, but if they don't know and it's not transparent, nobody's going to stand behind this district. So our staff, our employees need to know through the budget process, here's what administrative cost means. Let's take out the piece of administrators so you know. They need to know what carryover funds are. They need to know what 301 dollars are. They need to know why it doesn't go to them. If we don't do that, we're not going to get advocates. If you don't give me the information I need, I'm not going to be your advocate. I'm going to advocate on what I believe and what I've researched. But when you clarify, then I turn around and say, yeah, I can stand behind our superintendent, our administration, because they've given me information that I understand I can disseminate. But if you want advocates, our budget process has to change. School budgets are very complex, not like ones that I deal with next door over here. Very, very complex. And very few in this room know them outside of you. And you do very well at it. You do very good at it. So we need to get out and let people know.
Madam President, members of the board, what I would say that every year, since I've been here at least, this information, specifically even the classroom dollars, we do communicate that. We just had it last Friday, I believe it was. And so we'll continue to do that and take it maybe to the next level and continue to bring more knowledge and information about some of these categories, but also to bring more knowledge and understanding that education, while there's been additional monies in the system, it's still underfunded significantly.
Madam President, what we have tried to do this year is I've established some different superintendent advisory councils. Yesterday or Tuesday, we had the first SPAC, and that's the Superintendent's Parent Advisory Council, and Mr. Berrigan did present the budget there. It is our intent to use our community as advocates for us and share that information. Again, yesterday Mr. Berrigan presented to Kiwanis. It's the business partnerships so they can understand also what is happening. Next week, I believe on Tuesday, I have another Superintendent's Advisory Council that is representation from every school of a teacher that we are going to begin to have these difficult conversations with and share this information with them. It also is my expectation with our administrators that the information that is shared, for particular that we did last on Tuesday with the parent group, they be given the opportunity to share that during their coffee talks as well, and we provide that information. So we hear what you are saying. We want to be transparent. We do have our presentations and we have them posted, but we also need to put some legs to it. And so we're hoping with some of these advisory councils we'll be able to do that.
I see that on your great Twitter account.
My Twitter account.
That's good. I like it. All right, any other questions, comments? No? All right. I'll need a motion then to approve item 6D.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. O'Donnell, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ms. Bartels?
Aye.
Ms. Pimentel?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so the motion passes. All right, we are at item 7, a discussion item on the board self-evaluation. All right, so we had at our last workshop, we had a lengthy discussion about the use of the evaluation tool, 2 of them actually. And then at I don't believe Mr. O'Donnell was at that portion of the workshop that when we discussed this. And at the last board meeting, in which you weren't there, it was suggested that we hold off until we have all board members present so that we could have a discussion. The discussion is around the Arizona School Board Association self-board evaluation tool, and then we do have one in policy that I don't believe, as long as I've been on the board, that we have ever used. So I will open this up to discussion.
I did reach out because when we left that workshop, we had landed on, let's see if we can do it again. And see if ASBA would be willing to, waive any fees associated with it. And had the opportunity to speak to both Dr. Ogle as well as Nikki Whaley, because they would be the 2 people to make that decision. And they said, yeah, we can, because things got skewed, in the communication on their end as well, it didn't allow us to complete the process the first time around. So they said that they were willing to do it again, complete the process free of charge, because it also provided them an opportunity to see, did because of the makeup of people, or any of the outcomes a little bit different, and, be able to have a little discussion on that. If we land in the same place, then we have a place to focus.
Okay, so if you could let the board know what exactly that process is.
Okay. So the very first thing would be we need to provide ASBA with a 2-week window. Again, they would send out the link for each of us individually to go in and just answer the questions. That would be the 5 board members plus superintendent. They would then compile the information. We would get the full expanded report versus the, both the little one as well as the full expanded report, and then we could have a workshop facilitated that allowed us to develop board goals for our level, the 5 of us, as to areas that we see, if we see a lot of black and red that we're like confused on. Is it because we don't understand that, or is there something we feel is missing and that's a goal that we can develop?
And who facilitates the?
Nikki Whaley would. And like I said, it would be free of charge.
And how long of a workshop is that?
About an hour and a half, 2 hours, depends on how well we get in our conversation. And so, but first would be the 2-week window for the evaluation.
Question, couple questions. I'm looking on the, I don't have my glasses, so I can't see too well, but I don't see a date when this is our current policy, is this correct? This is the policy we follow? So can anyone tell me when this policy that I have in front of me was actually adopted? It's generally on here, but I don't see it on here.
No, right here. That would have been it's from manual adoption of 2003.
2003? Okay. And we've followed this policy since it's been adopted? We haven't even gone to use it, so we don't know if it actually passes or fails? Correct? So we haven't even given it a chance? I mean, now that we're evaluating ourselves, why aren't we using a policy why are we changing something we haven't even used? We haven't even given it a chance. It appears to cover quite a bit. I'm not necessarily in favor of having, I believe Ms. Whaley isn't she I know she's a member of ASBA, but isn't she also a board member from another school district? I'm not real comfortable with another board member from another governing body telling this governing body how we should self-evaluate. I know she belongs to a much larger board of the ASBA, but I'm not too comfortable with that. I would really like to trial and error this that we have in front of us. It was worked by a previous board that did, after looking at it, did a pretty decent job in creating it, and we haven't driven it yet to decide where its flaws are. I would not be in favor of having ASBA consult us, even if it is at no cost. I would prefer using what we have in front of us. Just my comments for now.
I was comparing the two, and the one from the School Board Association there's 72 questions, and I felt that there were quite a few that were kind of ambiguous. And the one in the policy is pretty straightforward, dealing with board relationship with superintendent, with the community. There's just the categories are pretty straightforward. Not that I would say I would like this one, but I do think that because it's in policy, that we should be able to use it. I'm not in favor so much of a 2-hour workshop. I'm retired, but some of us are, busy, and 2 hours extra outside of the school board meetings is a lot to ask of somebody. And then how much do we want to dig into this? Is another question. Do we want to really dig into it 2 hours worth, or, would just be made aware of where we need to be working as a board? Would that be sufficient? So those are all questions that I have.
Well, even if it was, consensus was not to have an outside facilitator, I don't think that is critical, because I think it does give us, even the initial report that we got that we didn't have the opportunity to discuss as a board, gave us areas for ourselves to look and say, okay, what does this mean? And it gives us the opportunity to improve, because then we're all on the same page of what does this look like? Do we agree on what this means? And then how do we move forward with that? I mean, I think honestly we could do the same thing ourselves and wouldn't necessarily need it to be 2 hours worth of time, but, you know, the reality is we've never done one. So, from start to finish,
No, we
so.
haven't. That's right, because we have never done one. I would think that maybe we should start with what's in policy. But I'll leave that up to the board, or we know how Ms. Smith feels, so you want to take into consideration that she is very much in favor of the Arizona School Board Association and a self-evaluation, as is Ms. Bartels.
Let me, if I may, I failed to mention, to the board, I'm speaking to the board, pardon me, because I believe I left early the day of the workshop, so I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for tabling that item for a time that the whole board is available. So I just want to thank you all for doing that. I really appreciate you. And I failed to mention that you didn't have to do that because you had a quorum and you didn't have to do that, but you felt it was important that we're all there. So I want to recognize you for that. But getting back to principal, I don't know how many policies exist today that we require staff to follow, that maybe they haven't followed because the policy hasn't been introduced. In my principles, I wouldn't say scrap it and do another one. I'd say you need to follow that policy and try it. If it doesn't work, give us some feedback. So I believe that if we try it, because I'm checking off the things that we're already doing. I mean, a lot of what is here is we're already doing, and I can answer some of these questions here pretty quickly. But trial and error, if it doesn't work, then we go back to the drawing board. But we haven't even tested over this thing. So again, we hold staff accountable to the policy. We should hold ourselves accountable to current policy that we haven't even tried yet. So that's where I am. I haven't casted a vote on it yet, but this is an action item. Is that correct?
No, it's a discussion item.
Okay, just a discussion. Okay, so there's no motion to be made today or nothing. But I mean, if I had the opportunity, I would. I think that we need to give this a try. I don't think it's bad. I think I wasn't on the board at that time, so school board members at the time created this for a reason, and we need to follow it and see if it works. So.
Madam President, yes. When we received the school board evaluation from ASBA, I was under the assumption that we were doing this to help them develop something. And we were part of a pilot program, if I remember correctly. And I think at the time, I didn't realize we had our own thing in policy. And like you, and I liked your word ambiguous, I felt that some of these questions were also ambiguous, if I can't think of a better term. But in going over this a little bit deeper, and being new kid on the block still, somewhat, I find what we have in policy to be pretty straightforward. And I don't know how often before I got here there was about a board evaluation.
I don't think we've ever had one.
So,
well, then, is it the boards that we've got on our we shouldn't talk about that in future meetings. We'll wait till we get to that one. But we do, in policy, have a suggested timeline for a self-evaluation. So I think we want to make a decision rather quickly as to what route we're going to go.
Well, let me just say this. So I believe no later than October 30th, so we're still within that date to complete it, correct? So I would give my consensus, that's what we're looking for today, to continue with the current board policy we have, and I'm prepared to give my consensus. That's where I am with it, and I would like to try this one, and I think we're still within the date. If the date doesn't change, it's October 30th. There's plenty of time to do that.
Anyone else? I'm going to go ahead. My vote's with the one in policy. To try that one, since it's already in policy.
Do you need consensus from everyone?
Well, I think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I'll give mine to keep the current policy.
I'm with current exhibit.
What's in policy?
The current exhibit that's in policy. because that's what you're talking about, is using the exhibit that exists.
Okay. All right. The consensus is to go ahead with the one that's in policy. We'll give that a try, see if we like it.
I think we owe it to ourselves. I think if it's in policy, being that I'm a government employee, that's kind of the basis of what we do in government, is to go along with what's in policy, not to say that, I mean, that's my take.
Well, I'll speak for myself. I can't speak for Ms. Smith, but I agree. You know, we do have a policy. We are supposed to do this annually. We've never done it. Even the 2.5 years I sat in the audience before being on the board, it didn't happen, and even further back than that. So I think that is, you know, the first step is that we need to actually do it. You know, we hold our staff accountable to the policies. The state holds our staff accountable to the policies, and, you know, we owe that to them to do it all the way. So I think we just need to communicate the next steps, which would be for each of us to fill out these forms so that they can be compiled, so that we can complete that process in public, because we are supposed to do that.
Okay, which is, if anybody doesn't have anything else to say, it's going to lead me right into the next agenda item, which is future meetings and events. So, along those same lines, do we want to do a workshop on this, or is it best to have Liz send this out to us, we fill it out, and then at the end of a board meeting, or just previous to that, she can give us the outcome, and then that way we can take a look, and then we're kind of aware of where we stand with the evaluation. We can discuss it at that time, and, you know, just take a short period of time to go over it. And I don't think we really need a workshop on that.
No, but we definitely need to have it on the agenda for discussion, so that we can.
Right.
That is supposed to be public.
Right. So.
And Madam President, am I correct in understanding that we need to get this done before October 30th?
Yeah, it looks like October 18th. We already have on the future meetings board self-evaluation.
Okay.
So yeah, so that would put us about right, because we don't have the normal meeting, which is the second week, because we will be on fall break.
Okay.
So
yeah, but if it's a case of getting this evaluation instrument out to each of us and giving us a deadline of, say, next Friday to turn it in by, then we can have that information ready to go for that meeting.
So you're requesting it to be compiled prior to that meeting?
Yeah. Do we want to do it before the meeting, or just take a few minutes afterwards?
Well, technically, that discussion of what our outcomes should be during the meeting.
Yeah, but I mean after the agenda items.
Yeah, that's fine.
I have just clarification, please. In policy, it says the superintendent and others who regularly work with the board may be asked to participate in all or a portion of the appraisal. I need guidance on that, please.
So for you to fill out the evaluation as well?
Yeah, because it's saying superintendent and others who regularly may be asked. Mm-hmm. So is the governing board is the governing board going to ask the superintendent and others, or is it just the governing board, is my question?
Oh, I would think the superintendent and the executive team, or do you just want to include the superintendent?
I think definitely Mrs. Sagaya Jones. I'm not sure who in the last thing,
in the last one, it was just the board plus superintendent in the ASBA one, yeah.
That's what I
So
thought.
let me just clarify, is the question, because I'm shaking my head because I think I'm listening to what I'm hearing. Is the question, two questions, I guess. The first question is it the board that asks the superintendent? That's one. The second one, are we asking if we want the superintendent and designated staff to help us evaluate ourselves?
That's what it says. The superintendent and others who regularly work with the board may be asked to participate in all or a portion of the appraisal. So it's up to the board to determine whether you want me and whoever else you want to be a part of this appraisal.
Yeah, I can answer for myself, this individual board member. Yeah, the board shall ask the superintendent if we choose to have that involvement. Yes, I believe we should ask.
Do you want her to fill out the evaluation as well? I think is probably the.
My say would be yes.
I would say no, but that's just me. We're the policymakers. I think that it's good for the superintendent to listen in, and but I don't know that I would ask the superintendent to evaluate the board. Not quite there yet.
See, and I don't think it's necessarily that the superintendent would be evaluating us, but providing feedback on where in her role. So like if your first question is the board imparts information on issues, needs, and complaints, that the superintendent would know, is the board actually doing that, yes or no?
Are we going to ask employees to be involved?
No, that's why she's asking us right now because it is a partnership up here, it's a two-way street. We do need to work with the superintendent needs to work with us. How are we doing? That does directly impact how the things go.
I'm not comfortable with it, but I'm just one. But I do feel that if there's going to be an ask that comes from the board, I'm not comfortable with the superintendent being part of that to that extent.
What do you think, Ms. Pinto?
I'm on the fence with that one. Because she worked with us so closely, I understand why. However, I do understand Mr. Aldama's point that quite literally, we are the board members, she is the superintendent. So I'm
If it's our first time doing this, let's just stick with the board this time.
I'm just asking because it has the policy, we're trying to adhere to the policy, which I appreciate, because keep bringing in more policies that we need to update, and it just, it has the word superintendent, so I just want to make sure I'm doing what I'm asked to do by the governing board, but whatever it is that you wish, I'm comfortable with.
Of course, we would always appreciate your input when we do have the discussion.
Absolutely, thank you.
The key word here is may be asked.
Yes, it is. That's why I said it. Doesn't say it shall, it says may.
All right, so we've got that straight. Are there any other agenda items or meetings that you feel should be listed on?
Yes, Madam President. One, as we heard earlier from Mr. Bergen, I think at some point we need to, after perhaps we get the 40th day report and even the 100th day report, but the 40th day report, we need to start having those conversations about programmatic changes and starting to discuss some of those have those difficult conversations about what do we do. So maybe we can wait until after we have our 40th day report. I think the 100th day is the end of January, 1st of February might be a little late to have those conversations to make changes, but perhaps maybe in late November, 1st of December, we could have a study session about what are we going to do to make some changes. Also, the other one I would recommend is I'm asking permission on December 6th board meeting. We just received notification that Mr. Ames, the Ames Ranch, is this year going to ask that we send 3 schools, and he's having it back at his ranch. And so one of those dates happens to be on Thursday, December 6th, and the other one is on Friday, December 7th. So I would ask, could we possibly, typically we've only done one in December sometimes, if we could just do the December 20th and not have the December 6th so that everybody could attend the Ames Ranch.
So moved.
That sounds good to me.
Oh, Mr. Berrigan, I think he might have a report. Yes.
Sorry, I hate to do this to the board. Statutorily, we're required to revise the budget no later than December 15th, and with the decrease in enrollment, we would be forced to revise the budget downward no later than December 15th.
So we could just change the date of one.
That's not
Just
Oh, the last week in November, because we, yeah. Oh, yeah, that second week is ASBA. So the last week in November, we could do
As
that.
long as there's an alternative date,
Right.
we're happy to conform to that.
Okay.
So would the day before possibly work as well, December 5th? So just offering other, options just so that.
Just so we make the, I'm sorry, just so we meet the December 5th deadline.
Yeah. Okay.
So are we going to get a date sent to us?
Do you want
You want
Liz
to check calendar? Liz, you want to work with them on calendars, and we could possibly look at December 5th, and then not have it December 20th?
Right now, I'm fine on those both days. So.
Okay. Yeah, we'll look at December 5th. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have several items.
Huh?
I have several items. because we never finalized district goals in public. We had individual meetings afterwards, but we never came back and landed on anything, and that was something we were supposed to do.
Our goals or?
The district goals.
Okay,
You mean superintendent goals?
district goals were set, and then there was a conversation about the superintendent's goals, and then the conversation came around the survey, the self-evaluation, to set board goals. So the district goals
Or what we worked on at the workshop?
at the workshop.
Superintendent
got
goals we
3 of
didn't
those.
finish.
The superintendent goals I had, and you wanted me to go back
Yes.
and do some indicators.
Here's the goals that we adopted during the workshop.
Along with the norms and the collective commitments. The conversation that about the other goals, I understood to be the board goals, but they were not the district goals. So is that what we're talking about?
But then that also,
We were talking about the ones that were district outcomes, but that were more specific. That way, when we do the evaluation.
oh, you're talking about the indicators.
Yes.
For the superintendent indicators?
I thought we had decided that she would be meeting with you individually, which she did, and that she would get a feel as to what you would be looking for on each of her goals, and that we would stick with the indicators that are already in the tool.
Okay, so then I missed something, because I thought it was after we met, that was when we were going to come back and have the very specifics, so that was identified as what we would be, basing our evaluation on for the district goals, would be those specific indicators.
Well, we already have specific indicators on in the evaluation itself that we've been using, and then it was suggested that, or was kind of implied that getting deeper into that would be more of a micromanaging than an actual, that she would actually come up with the rest of how she met those goals.
So if I may
The
chime in.
indicators are already in that.
So if I may chime in, that is correct. I did not agree with it, but that's where we landed. So I will support it because that's where it landed. I was in agreement with it. I believe Ms. Bartels and Ms. Smith and I were not in favor of that, but that's where we ended. And I just threw up my hand and said, okay, that's where we're going. So that's what you just said is exactly where we left off. If that changes tonight, I was not on board with that, but I left it at that and I was moving in that direction, so.
So you want more than what's in the evaluation
No,
tool?
I'm done. Like I said, we left it that day, we left it and we were done with it.
No, we're probably not, should be having this discussion. I guess the superintendent goal progress, that's coming up in October. So I did meet with everybody individually, but you did not give me clear indicators of what you wanted. Nobody did.
Go for it.
So you...
No,
so
actually, what you gave us, I think...
You wanted me to tweak the verbiage as indicated by, and there was another term used that Mr. Aldama used, that they wanted to see evidence of, and those words. So I have those, and I tweaked what I captured from when I met, and I can send those. But do you want to do that on October 18th when it's the superintendent's goal progress report? And determine if that's what you want or not.
I think we need to stick with what's on the future meetings, because what's happened to us in the past is we end up getting pushed into the next year, or it just keeps going forward. Yeah, we never stick with it. I think we need to stick with it.
And I'm happy during that goal progress report, when we have that discussion, to make any adjustments that need to be done.
Okay. All right, and then we do have 2 board members that received recognition for training from ASBA, so I didn't know if you wanted to do that as a quick thing in the October.
Absolutely.
ASBA will have 1 policy change that we do need to get on our agenda and vote on that as well. They do have voting open now, so, and it is only the 1 policy.
Okay, anything else?
Yep. We just got, I don't know, it looked like 1 policy may have to come back to us because they just sent out another revision, because it also said that there is a certificate that needs to be filed with us voting on that.
Is that the one that I got in the mail?
Today, an email. Yeah, IHB with regards to, I know it's special ed.
Yeah, and those are ASB's recommendations. So
Yeah.
we can look at those.
So, because I know in that it said that there was some certificate that the state was requiring to show that, yes, we had seen it, we had approved the updated stuff, so.
I've got an agenda item request. I believe we're absent of one. And if we're not, if we're not absent of one, then we're not following it. So what I'd like to ask is that we create an agenda item process. So when a board member asks for an agenda item, how long does it take for that agenda item to come back on the agenda? That's one. Two, create a list of those, and it can be in a board report or it can be emailed to us, but we need to see those. The only one that has those right now is Liz, and then it's the president brings it back. So we need to create a process and protocol how agenda items are managed so they don't get lost. I mean, I have some out there that never come back. It is what it is. It's too hard to go back in minutes. If I call Liz, it'll take her time, but she'll do it. So I think we need to create some kind of, I don't know if it's policy, but just a process on how we manage agenda items. Everybody here that brings an agenda item, it is very important that be brought back. If it fails, but it has to come back. And so I'd like to ask the board to look into that and put this agenda item on the agenda so we can talk about how. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
we need to create that, so.
And then that would tie in, just to remind that Ms. Smith had asked, and it was originally going to be on this meeting, and of course she wasn't going to be here, was the list of stuff so that we can identify, what are things that can be in the consent agenda versus always being out separate as action items.
We have that in the board update.
Okay.
Yeah, it was in the board update.
Okay.
So on the agenda item request that I just gave, so I don't know exactly how that's going to happen. So the superintendent bring back some ideas, or we're just going to put on the agenda to have our ideas disseminated that day. So
Why don't we put on the agenda item how we bring forth agenda items? That needs to be, because it has to be not one board member asking for an agenda item. You all have to agree to that. So let's talk about how we bring the agenda item. And then I would work with Ms. Powell. We would just create our list of those agenda items, and we would plug in which meetings they would reappear on, because some of them may take time for staff to research. But we can have the date it was asked for, the date we will bring it, and the date it's been addressed.
So let's just, then with that said, without discussing it today, let's just get on the agenda so we can ask all those questions and formulate this thing, because it's just unfair to board members when items don't come back.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. We are at the summary of current events. We'll begin with our superintendent.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board. Thank you, administrators, teachers, staff who are out there in community. Things that are going on, I kind of talked a little bit about. We have our parent communications where we have the Superintendent's Parent Advisory Council, where our parents came and we had a good conversation with them. We sent them off. We meet again November 12th. We sent them off, or November 13th, I believe. We sent them off with homework. One of their things is we really want to get their voice and help us with marketing and help them be the face of GESD. So we told them they needed to create a billboard that answers the questions, why do you send your child to school every day? And then on the front and then on the back, they're going to come back with things that we can do to improve the district as well. So we're starting to have those conversations. We have asked all administrators to put forth a district calendar events, all their events, so that we can place them on the district calendar. Most are doing that. We'll give them a deadline to make sure they're there. So when you go onto the website and you look at the internal calendar, you'll see every event at the site. So that gives you time in advance to prepare for. Also, some of these other, let me talk about the community partnerships that are happening. Kiwanis has been wonderful with us. They are going, as I think someone mentioned, we are going to, we've had the back-to-school event where they take our children to Kohl's and they get their uniforms. They've also are going to do a, around the holidays in December, a coat drive for kids within the district and shoes, because at that time, that's when we see a need for shoes and coats. So they're going to help us with that as well. Today at Coyote Ridge Lions Club was there, and they were giving vision screening to all of our students there, so those partnerships continue. We continue the partnership with Glendale PD. We attend coffee with a police officer, and we learned about what is happening and build those relationships. Today was a good example. We had, couldn't get into Coyote Ridge this morning. We had to go a different route, so we worked closely with the sergeants to get that done. Also, other community partnerships is Love Our School Day is Saturday, so we have several schools participating in that. So we continue to do those. Also, this week I've been out, you saw me on Twitter, I'm visiting all sites, we're continuing to do that. Other city partnerships I want to make you aware of, we're working with the Glendale businesses to, in particular around Glendale Glitters. We will be showcasing some of our artwork. We have some of our schools will be performing music performances. Also, I know Jack will be performing. One of their groups is performing, but Norma Heidegge, under the supervision of Dr. Jerry Peterson and Carvalho, is working to promote the art, music, and band with our businesses. We'll get those dates out to you for that. And other than that, we have our parent-teacher conferences coming up, and that happens next week, so we look forward to those things occurring as well. And one thing I did want to mention, we did an extensive training through our legal counsel with restraints and students for our administrators and staff. And what we're seeing across the nation is really our children are coming with such social and emotional needs. And I think that's a conversation we're going to have. One of the meetings I was at with superintendents was we were talking about what are those initiatives that we want our legislators to really focus on for funding. And one of those was we talked about everybody is really concerned about safe schools, and we are, but the likelihood of an active shooter coming in and harming an administrator or a teacher is far less than a student that has social emotional needs that's throwing a desk or something. And so we really need to think about that. And when we look at programmatic changes, what is it that we can do to help support our students and our families that are in crisis and that are in need, and what we can do for our administrators and teachers every day with what they go through to help support those students. And so I think that's something we need to keep in mind. So we did provide training for them, but also it's a bigger problem than just providing a restraint on students and what we do. It's about keeping staff safe as well and other students as well. So at a later date, we will bring some recommendations on programmatic changes we like to see in order to support our families and our students, and also at the same time make sure that our principals and our students and teachers are safe. Thank you.
Will the district be participating in the hometown parade?
Yes, we have, Liz has a registration, Dr. Peterson and Carvalho is working with his staff again, and there is a meeting, they have a planning meeting set up. They're kind of being secretive about that. They probably don't want me to tell them what to do, but, you know, sure that's it. No, of course not. Of course not. But no, yes, we will be as well. Thank you.
All right, good. All right, we are at the governing board report, so we'll start with Mr. Aldama.
Yeah, thank you. Just one thing, two things. Thank you all for listening to us, and thank you for all that you do at your respective sites, and administrators, thank you for what you do as well. I know sometimes my comments are harsh, but I truly appreciate what you all do. We're advocates for the community, and sometimes we have to ask some really tough questions, but it doesn't take away from the appreciation and respect I have for the work you do. Outside of a board member, as the council member for the city, I have district meetings, and so I invite members of our board, if there's a quorum posted, and our superintendent, anybody else who wants to attend. I think it's important that our cities and our school districts start to mingle more and start to meet each other. So I'm having my second annual, I'm sorry, not second annual, I have them twice a year. My fall district meeting will be held at the Ceremony Coffee Shop, which is downtown Glendale at the, it's at 7150 North 57th Avenue. It's on October 25th. Let me see, October 24th, from 5:30 to 7:30. We'll have food, music, and drinks, non-alcoholic drinks. We'll have city staff there, Parks and Rec will be there, library will be there. We haven't had the library there, so bring kids. We'll have things for kids, but I invite our board and I invite our superintendent. Ms. Segato-Jones has been to quite a bit of events since she's been the superintendent, more than I ever expected of her. And a lot, she's come to my events as well. So I want to thank you for all your activity out in the public. It's taken traction and people are recognizing it, so I thank you for that. But I invite you to come to this district meeting. You'll get some information from city staff. But again, start making a unity relationship between schools and the city. So I invite anybody here to go.
Okay, and then just a reminder, if you do plan on going, please let Liz know so that we can post a quorum.
The Ceremony Shop at downtown Glendale. Thank you.
Thank you. Good, thank you. All right, Ms. Bartels.
Just a reminder that it is this Saturday that is Love Our Schools Day, and anybody can go to schoolconnectaz.org and go to the link on there. When I looked, it appeared that every single one of our educational facilities, including GSA, had projects to do, and even when you go in there, you can select different projects, whether they're inside or outside. I think I picked an outside one, and I think it's going to be warm this weekend. So share it with your communities and let your parents know that there's an opportunity for them to come in and show their love for our schools. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Pimentel.
Thank you. Liz put me down. I'm going to go to the ceremony shop. I will be at Mr. Obama's community event. I think it's good for us to be accessible to the community, and we're parents and we're grandparents, and to know that we're there. I was not able to make it to the last board meeting where there was a celebration of the students who got 100% on the merit test, so I would like to say congratulations to those students and to the parents and the families. I think it's amazing, and I think that the number goes up every year. And as a student myself, I never got close to that 100% thing, and I tried my hardest. And to the students who didn't get 100%, that's not to show that they're not growing. They are growing significantly every day and every year, and sometimes the number doesn't reflect the growth in our students. So I just want to say congratulations to all the students and parents. And I think it's fall now, so happy fall. And I'm looking forward to the cooler weather in the 80s next week. So.
Yeah, we hope, yeah. All right, good, thanks. Well, Trust Board met for the first time this year, yesterday, and we were given a report on medical and dental by Mr. Barry. And it was good to see everybody there. We do have the same concerns with our trust, with our benefits, with the decline in enrollment and other factors as well, but we'll be keeping an eye on that. We have a great wellness program here, I think, in the district, and it's important for everybody to, participate if you can. I know there are fitness classes at our various different sites, and then we've got the flu shots coming up, which are going to be good. I believe next month is the wellness fair that we're going to have at Landmark, so keep a watchful eye on that as well. And before we adjourn, I believe we have a very special birthday today. Ms. Valadez, it's her 27th, I'm told, huh? So I want to say happy birthday to you. Have a great day and enjoy. Yeah. Do we need to sing happy birthday?
Happy birthday
to you. Happy birthday to you.
Embarrass myself, so.
That's why I was just going to let him go.
I don't need a motion.
You weren't even going to say
I wasn't.
Okay, Ms. Alonso is here. We wanted to congratulate you on your position. If you'll, okay, good. Thank you, and congratulations. All right, I'll need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Grab it. Oh, I need to sign stuff, right? Jamie, you want to sign this before you?